The Alpha King's pup growled at the rejected Omega. Everyone froze when she knelt and let him climb. https://youtube be/qwgjzvtzogi $si=r7-uka 3 rmxoypzd-. The Great Hall of Moonstone Palace went so quiet you could hear a pin drop on the marble. 300 of the most powerful wolves on the continent stood frozen, watching, afraid to breathe. In the center of the room was Leo, the Alpha King's 4-year-old son, the boy everyone whispered about. The biter. The screamer. The one with a feral, uncontrollable rage. He rumbled a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate inside every chest, lips peeled back, teeth bared at the servant girl trembling on the floor. The guards lifted their rifles. The king lunged forward, shouting for them to stand down. And then the impossible happened. The girl didn't run. She didn't plead. She simply knelt, lowered her head, and exposed her neck. And the child everyone called a monster didn't bite. He climbed into her arms, buried his face against her throat, and began to sob. This is the story of A.R. Vance, and how a single act of submission brought the Alpha King to his knees. A.R. Vance was invisible, or at least she forced herself to be. In the hierarchy of the Silver Lake Pack, she ranked lower than dirt on an Alpha's boots. She was an Omega, but worse than that, she was a rejected Omega. 3 years ago, on her 18th birthday, her fated mate, the Pack Beta, Thomas Grady, took one look at her frail body and stuttering voice and laughed. In front of the entire pack house, he rejected her without hesitation and chose her glamorous stepsister, Jessica, instead. That rejection didn't just break her heart. It shattered her wolf. From that day on, she couldn't shift. She was trapped in human form, weak, damaged, and discarded, sent to the kitchens to scrub pots until her hands were raw and split open, bleeding into the soap water. Alara, move it. The head housekeeper's sharp bark snapped AAR out of her haze. Mrs. Gable's eyes cut like knives. The Alpha King arrives in less than an hour. If I see even one speck of dust on these banquet tables, you'll be sleeping in the kennels tonight. Yes, ma'am, AAR whispered, keeping her gaze locked on the floor. Tonight was the Winter Solstice Gala, the most important event the territory had hosted in a decade. Alpha King Julian Blackwood, ruler of all packs, was touring his lands, and he had chosen Silver Lake for the celebration. The rumors about King Julian were enough to make grown wolves tremble. Cold. Ruthless. A heart carved from stone. His queen had died 4 years ago under mysterious circumstances, and since then, anyone who dared cross him had paid dearly. But the whispers about his son were worse. Prince Leo. The cursed pup. The kitchen staff murmured about him as they chopped vegetables and plated food. They said the boy was wrong, broken. He didn't speak. He only growled. In the last 6 months alone, he'd sent 5 nannies to the medic's wing, some of them to the hospital. A wild beast trapped in a child's body. And the king brought him everywhere because leaving him behind meant chaos. AAR tightened her grip on the heavy silver platter in her hands. She didn't care about kings or princes. She just wanted to make it through the night without Thomas and Jessica finding a new way to humiliate her. When she stepped into the massive ballroom to set down the appetizers, she saw them immediately. Thomas stood near the punch bowl, his arm wrapped possessively around Jessica's waist. Jessica looked radiant in a red silk gown, so expensive it felt like it was worth more than AAR's entire life. Well, look who crawled out, Jessica sneered, her voice carrying easily over the soft jazz. The kitchen rat is loose. Thomas chuckled into his champagne. Careful, Jess. Don't stare too long. It's depressing. I still can't believe the moon goddess thought that was supposed to be my mate. Dodged a bullet. AAR felt the familiar sting behind her eyes, but she clenched her jaw until she tasted copper. She lowered the tray with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I'm just doing my job, she murmured. Your job is to be invisible, Jessica hissed, stepping closer, then deliberately slamming her shoulder into AAR's. AAR stumbled. The tray of shrimp cocktails wobbled. She threw out an arm and caught it just before it crashed onto the pristine white floor, but one small ramekin of cocktail sauce tipped. Thick red liquid splattered across Jessica's expensive shoes. The room seemed to pause. "You clumsy idiot," Jessica shrieked. "Do you even know what these cost? You ruined them." I'm so sorry," AR breathed. "I can clean it." She dropped to her knees, reaching for a napkin. Thomas kicked her hand away. "Don't touch her," he growled, his beta aura flaring hot and heavy through the air. "Get out of here, AR. You're a disgrace to this pack." AR lurched upright, clutching the tray to her chest as heat flooded her face. Shame burned down to the bone. She rushed toward the service doors, wishing the floor would split open and swallow her whole. She didn't see the tall, dark figure standing in the shadows near the entrance, watching the entire scene with eyes like molten gold. AAR shoved through the doors into the service hallway and collapsed against the wall, sliding down until she hit the floor. She covered her face with her hands, breath shuddering. "I can't do this anymore," she thought. "I just want to disappear." But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Alpha King Julian Blackwood adjusted the cuffs of his Italian suit, his jaw locked in a hard, unforgiving line. He despised these galas, despised the polished smiles, the ambitious alphas trying to barter their daughters, and the thick stink of desperation that followed him everywhere. "Is he calm?" Julian asked. His voice was a deep baritone that demanded obedience before the command even finished. His gamma, Marcus Healy, kept pace beside him. "For now, Alpha. The new nanny, Miss Claire, is with him upstairs in the private suite." Julian didn't slow. "But," Marcus swallowed. "He's agitated. The noise, the smells, it's setting him off." He bit Miss Claire's hand when she tried to put on his tie. Julian closed his eyes, exhaling slowly, through his nose like he was forcing the anger back down into a cage. "If he hurts her, pay her double and send her to the medic. Just keep him in the room, Marcus. I cannot have an incident tonight. The council is already whispering that I can't control my own heir. If they decide Leo is unstable, they would push to have him erased from the line of succession." "I understand," Marcus said quietly. "I've posted 2 guards at the door." Julian gave a single nod and stepped into the ballroom. The moment he crossed the threshold, the atmosphere shifted. The music cut off mid-note. Every wolf in the room instinctively bowed their heads in submission. The power rolling off him was suffocating, a pure, ancient alpha aura that demanded absolute obedience. Julian moved through the crowd, acknowledging the bowed wolves with curt nods. He spotted Alpha Sterling of the Silver Lake pack hurrying toward him, sweat beading on his forehead. "Your Majesty," Sterling said, bowing deeply. "Welcome to Silver Lake. We are honored." "Spare me the pleasantries, Sterling," Julian interrupted coldly. "I'm here to discuss border treaties, not to drink your wine." Of course," Sterling stammered. "But first, please allow me to introduce my daughter, Jessica, and her mate, Thomas. They are the future of this pack." Julian's eyes narrowed. He recognized them immediately. Earlier, from the shadows, he had watched them corner and bully a small, frantic servant girl. Julian despised bullies. Thomas stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "It's an honor, King Blackwood." Julian ignored the outstretched hand. He simply stared until Thomas shifted uncomfortably and looked away. "I saw you earlier," Julian said, his voice low and dangerous. "With the girl in the gray dress." Thomas went pale. "Oh, that? She's just a clumsy Omega, Your Majesty. A rejected one. She's defective." "Defective," Julian repeated slowly, the word tasting like poison. An interesting choice of language. Before he could say more, a sudden commotion erupted near the grand staircase. Screams. Julian spun around as the double doors at the top of the stairs burst open. A young woman, the nanny, Claire, ran out clutching her arm, blood seeping through her fingers. "He's loose," she screamed. He got out. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. At the top of the stairs stood a small boy, no more than 4 years old, with messy black hair and wild, terrified eyes. His formal jacket was gone, his shirt torn, his chest rising and falling in frantic breaths. "Leo," Julian commanded, stepping forward. "Stand down." But the boy didn't hear him. He was trapped in the grip of pure, instinctive panic. To the onlookers, he looked monstrous. A snarl tore from his throat. Far too feral, far too animalistic for a human child. "Catch him," someone shouted. It was the worst possible thing to say. Leo saw the guards move and perceived it as a threat. He vaulted over the banister, crashing onto the ground floor with a bone-shaking thud that should have shattered his legs, but his latent alpha blood protected him. Chaos exploded. Guests screamed and scattered, tables overturned, chairs crashed to the floor. "Don't shoot," Julian roared, sprinting forward. "Nobody touch him." Leo became a blur of motion, small, fast, driven by blind terror. He scrambled beneath a banquet table, sending it flipping over. He wasn't attacking. He was searching, desperately, for an exit, for safety, for something he couldn't even name. He bolted toward the service doors, the same ones the servant girl had used earlier. Julian lunged, but he was too far away. "Leo, stop." The boy burst through the doors into the service hallway, where the catering staff was staging dinner. Julian and the guards followed seconds later, with half the curious guests spilling in behind them. What they saw stopped everyone cold. The hallway was narrow. At the far end, pressed against the wall, stood Era. She was holding a tray of silverware, frozen in place. Leo stood 5 feet from her. His chest heaved. A deep, menacing growl rumbled from his small body. His fingers curled like claws, his posture coiled to strike. "Don't move," Julian ordered sharply, raising a hand to stop the guards. "If anyone moves, he'll attack her." Behind him, Thomas muttered loudly, "He's going to kill her." Well, nothing of value lost. Julian nearly tore his throat out on instinct, but his focus stayed locked on his son. He prepared to use his alpha voice, to force submission, knowing it would hurt Leo, knowing it would break something fragile inside him. Leo took 1 step closer to Era. He bared his teeth. Era didn't look at the king. She didn't look at the guards or the hundreds of watching eyes. She looked only at the child. She saw the rage, yes. But beneath it, she saw what no one else did. She saw terror. A little boy overwhelmed by noise, lights, and adult aggression. A child drowning in fear. She saw herself. Era let the tray fall. Silverware clattered loudly across the floor, but she didn't flinch. "He's going to bite her face off," Jessica gasped. Slowly, deliberately, Era lowered herself to her knees. She didn't brace to fight. She didn't curl inward to protect herself. She knelt upright, exposing her neck, the ultimate sign of trust and submission in werewolf culture. But she didn't bow her head. Her eyes stayed soft, steady, locked on Leo. "Hey there," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible, but in the silence, it carried. It wasn't a servant speaking to a prince. It was a mother speaking to a frightened child. Leo's growling stopped. He tilted his head, confused. "It's loud out there, isn't it?" Era said gently. She slowly extended her hands, palms up, not reaching, not grabbing, just offering. "It's okay to be scared," she whispered. "I'm scared too." The entire pack held its breath. Julian's heart slammed against his ribs. No one had ever spoken to Leo like this. They had shouted, commanded, forced him into submission. Never this. Leo inhaled shakily. His lower lip trembled. The feral glaze in his eyes cracked, giving way to tears. "Come here, little wolf," Era murmured. And in that moment, the moment that would change the fate of the entire kingdom, Leo didn't attack. He buried his face in the crook of her shoulder, his small body trembling with deep, shuddering sobs. Era didn't hesitate. She wrapped her arms around him and held him tight, gently rocking him back and forth. "I've got you," she whispered, smoothing her hand through his hair. "I've got you. You're safe." Julian felt his knees threaten to give out. For 4 years, his son had never allowed anyone to hold him like that, not even his own father. The king stepped forward, and the crowd parted as if by instinct, opening a path for him. He walked straight toward the Omega and his son. Era lifted her head, eyes widening in fear as she realized the Alpha King was towering over her. She started to pull away to bow, but Leo let out a warning growl at his own father. His grip tightened in Era's dress. "Mine," that growl seemed to say. Julian stopped. He stared at the rejected girl who had calmed the storm inside his child with nothing but quiet kindness. "What is your name?" Julian asked, his voice steady. "Elara, your majesty," she whispered. Julian lowered himself onto one knee, shocking the entire assembly until he was eye level with her. "Elara," Julian repeated, his golden eyes burning with an intensity that made her shiver. "Pack your things. You're coming with us." Silence hung in the ballroom until it was shattered by Alpha Sterling's frantic footsteps. He rushed toward the center of the room, face pale, skin slick with sweat. "Your Majesty, surely you're joking," Sterling stammered, wringing his hands. "Era, she is nobody. A kitchen servant. A rejected Omega. She's mentally unstable. She hasn't shifted in 3 years." Julian rose to his full height, towering over the Silver Lake Alpha. He adjusted his suit jacket, his expression unreadable. "My son," he said, pointing toward the boy still clinging to Era's neck, "has not allowed a stranger to touch him in 2 years without drawing blood." He turned his gaze outward. "Look at him." Everyone did. Leo's eyes were closed. His breathing, ragged and panicked only moments ago, had settled into the rhythm of Era's steady heartbeat. He was nearly asleep. "She has accomplished in 5 minutes what your entire pack has failed to do all evening," Julian said, his voice turning cold as winter steel. "She's coming with me." "But she can't," a voice snapped. Thomas forced his way forward, shoving past his father-in-law. His face was twisted in an ugly mix of jealousy and possessiveness. Even after rejecting Era, seeing her suddenly elevated by the Alpha King triggered something primal and vicious inside him. "She's under contract," Thomas lied, stepping closer. "She owes this pack a debt for the food and shelter we've provided since her parents died. She cannot leave Silver Lake territory until that debt is paid."
Ara flinxa.
She looked up at Thomas, eyes shining with tears. "I've worked in the kitchens for 3 years without pay, Thomas," she said quietly. "Surely that covers a bed in the attic and leftovers." "You broke a crystal vase last week," Jessica cut in, stepping up beside Thomas. Her hand slid possessively onto his arm as she glared at Era with pure venom. "And today you ruined my shoes. That's thousands of dollars in damages. You aren't going anywhere until you work it off. It'll probably take another 10 years.
Ara's shoulders sank.
The hope that had flared inside her chest began to gutter out. They were right. In the werewolf world, pack law was merciless about debts. If she left without clearing her name, she'd be branded a rogue, a fugitive to be hunted down. Julian's gaze moved from Thomas to Jessica, and then back to Era. He saw the defeat in her eyes, and it ignited something sharp and furious inside him. "Marcus," Julian said, without looking away from Thomas. "Yes, Alpha," the Gamma answered, stepping forward and pulling a checkbook from his jacket. "How much?"
Julian asked.
Thomas blinked. "Excuse me?" "The debt," Julian repeated, his voice dropping an octave, heavy, vibrating with pure Alpha command. "How much do you think she owes you?" "F5, 1050? Thomas stammered, flustered, thrown off balance. Well, write a check for $1 million, Julian ordered Marcus. The entire room gasped. $1 million for a rejected Omega. It was unheard of. It was madness. "Your Majesty, that isn't necessary," Sterling began, greedy hope lighting his eyes. "It is necessary," Julian cut in smoothly, "because I am buying her freedom." He took the check from Marcus, signed it with a sharp flourish, and flicked it toward Thomas. The paper fluttered through the air and landed at the beta's feet. "Pick it up," Julian said softly. Thomas's face turned a furious red. He hesitated. "I said, Julian's eyes flashed gold as his wolf surged close to the surface.
Pick it up.
Trembling, Thomas bent down and snatched the check from the floor. The debt is paid, Julian declared, his voice ringing through the hall. Era Vance is no longer a member of the Silver Lake Pack. She is now under the protection of the Royal Moonstone Pack. His gaze swept the room like a blade. Anyone who touches her, insults her, or attempts to stop her from leaving answers to me. Then Julian turned back to Era. She was staring at him, mouth slightly open. No one had ever defended her. Not once. Can you stand? He asked, his tone softening instantly. I think so, she whispered. She tried to rise, but her legs were numb from kneeling, and Leo was heavy in her arms. She swayed. Before she could fall, Julian's hand shot out. He didn't grab her arm. Instead, he placed a large, warm hand at the small of her back, steadying her with a touch that was careful, controlled, and devastating. A shockwave of electricity ripped through Era's body. A spark so intense she nearly dropped Leo. Julian felt it too. He jerked his hand back as if he'd been burned, eyes widening a fraction. Sparks.
Impossible.
He had lost his mate years ago. Julian shook his head, forcing the sensation away, dismissing it as nothing more than static, nothing more than coincidence. Come, he said gruffly. The car is waiting. Era walked through the parted crowd with the sleeping prince in her arms. She passed Thomas, who clutched the check but stared at her with a strange, haunted expression. She passed Jessica, whose face had gone purple with rage. And when she stepped out into the cool night air, leaving the suffocating heat of the Silver Lake Pack house behind, Era took her first breath of freedom in 3 years. The Alpha King's convoy was already waiting. A line of black, armored SUVs sat on the gravel drive like a warning. A driver in a tailored suit opened the rear door of the middle vehicle. Get in, Julian ordered. Era climbed onto plush leather seats that swallowed her whole. The cabin smelled like pine after rain and expensive cologne. Julian's cologne. It wrapped around her senses, dizzying and far too intimate for someone like her. Julian slid in beside her and shut the door. The privacy partition was already raised. In the dark, quiet interior, it was just the 3 of them. You can put him down, Julian said, nodding toward the seat between them. I don't think he'll let go, Era whispered. She tried to gently ease Leo's fingers from her dress, but the boy whimpered in his sleep and tightened his grip. Julian watched them for a beat, something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. He hasn't slept like this in months. Usually, Leo screamed until exhaustion knocked him unconscious. Era lowered her gaze to the child and brushed a lock of dark hair from his forehead. He's not broken, Your Majesty. He's just sensitive. He feels everything. The anger in that room, the judgment, it hurts him physically. Julian's head snapped toward her. How do you know that? Era looked out the tinted window as the car began to roll, the Silver Lake Pack house shrinking behind them. Because, she said softly, I feel it too. The drive to Moonstone Palace took 4 hours. For most of the journey, silence fell like steady rain. It wasn't awkward, just heavy. Era was painfully aware of the man beside her. The Alpha King filled the space without trying. His thighs were thick with muscle beneath tailored trousers. He worked on a tablet, blue light carving sharp angles into his cheekbones and highlighting the permanent crease between his brows. She was terrified. She was a kitchen maid in a stained gray dress sitting next to the most powerful werewolf in the world. Stop thinking so loud, Julian murmured, without looking up. Era jolted. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. And stop calling me that. It's annoying.
His voice stayed flat.
Call me Alpha. Or Julian if we're in private. I couldn't possibly call you Julian, she gasped. That made him finally turn. His eyes swept her face, then paused on the bruise blooming on her arm where she'd hit the wall earlier. We have a lot to discuss, Era, he said quietly. But tonight, your only job is him. He nodded toward Leo. The convoy slowed. Era glanced outside and sucked in a breath. They were passing through massive iron gates guarded by wolves the size of bears. Beyond them rose Moonstone Palace. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress carved into the mountainside, overlooking a sprawling city of lights. Beautiful and terrifying in the way power always was. "Welcome home," Julian said dryly. The SUV rolled into a courtyard paved with ancient stone and stopped. The door opened, and cold mountain air rushed in, sharp enough to sting. "I'll take him," Julian said, reaching for his son.
No.
Leo woke instantly. His eyes flew open, and a low warning growl vibrated in his chest as he clung to Era's dress so hard the fabric tore. Julian froze. His own son was rejecting him. A flicker of pain crossed the king's face, so fast Era might have imagined it. "It's okay," Era blurted then, without thinking, laid a hand on Julian's arm to stop him. The second she realized what she'd done, she snatched her hand back. She had touched the king. Without permission. I mean, I can carry him, Alpha, she corrected quickly, dropping her gaze. "He's just disoriented." Julian stared at the spot where her fingers had been, as if something had sparked there, stronger than before. He cleared his throat.
Fine.
"Follow me." They entered the grand foyer, and Era's step slowed. It was a cathedral of marble and gold. A line of staff waited in rigid formation. At the front stood a severe woman with gray hair pulled into a tight bun. She wore a pristine black suit and looked like she hadn't smiled since the 1990s. "Welcome back, Your Majesty," the woman said, curtsying stiffly. Her eyes immediately snapped to Era, narrowing with open distaste. "And this is Vance," Julian announced. "She is the new caretaker for Prince Leo." "Caretaker." The woman sniffed. "Your Majesty, we have Miss Claire. She is a certified child psychologist from the Royal Academy." "Miss Claire was bitten and is currently in the hospital," Julian cut in. Era's stomach clenched. "Ilera is the only one Leo tolerates," Julian continued. "Mrs. Halloway, prepare the guest suite next to the nursery." "Mrs. Halloway's eyebrows shot up. "The guest suite, Your Majesty? Surely the servants' quarters in the East Wing would be more appropriate for her station." Her gaze raked Era like dirt. "Look at her. She is filthy." Era shrank back. She could feel the cocktail sauce stain on her hem. She could feel the ridiculous flower still pinned in her hair. "She stays next to Leo," Julian growled, his alpha tone cracking through the air so hard the staff flinched. "And Halloway, get her some clothes. Burn those rags." "Yes, Alpha, Mrs." Halloway forced out through clenched teeth. Julian turned to Era. "Go with her. Get settled. I have a council meeting I can't miss. I'll check on you in the morning." Then he turned and strode away, his black cape sweeping behind him like shadow. He didn't look back. Era was left alone with sharks. "Follow me, Mrs." Halloway snapped. "And don't touch anything. This vase is worth more than your entire bloodline." They climbed the grand staircase. The palace was a maze of luxury, but it felt cold, empty. No photos on the walls.
No flowers.
No signs anyone actually lived here. They reached the nursery wing. "Mrs." Halloway opened a door to a bedroom larger than the entire servants' dormitory back at Silver Lake. A king-sized bed. A balcony. A private bathroom. "The prince's room is through that connecting door," Halloway said, pointing. "Do not mistake this luxury for kindness. It's for the prince's convenience. If she failed, even once, she would be back on the streets before she could blink." "I understand," Ilera said quietly. Halloway left, slamming the door behind her. Era released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding and looked down at Leo. He was fully awake now, watching her with wide, sharp eyes far too intelligent for his age. "Well, little wolf," she whispered, "it's just you and me now." She set him gently on the bed. "Are you hungry?" Leo didn't answer. He only watched her. Era noticed a silver tray on the table, arranged with fruit and cheese. She picked up a slice of apple. "I'm starving," she said lightly. "I haven't eaten since breakfast." She took a bite, exaggerating the crunch. "Good apple." She held out a piece to Leo. He hesitated, then snatched it and stuffed it into his mouth, chewing with frantic speed. Slow down, she laughed softly. For the next hour, they sat on the floor eating apples and cheese. Era didn't try to make him talk or play. She didn't push. She simply stayed with him, sharing the quiet. Eventually, Leo yawned. Bath time, Era declared. Getting him into the bath was a struggle, though not a violent one. He splashed water everywhere, soaking her dress completely. But then, something happened that made her heart seize. A giggle. It was faint and rough, and used, but unmistakable. Leo was laughing as he splashed water at her. Era smiled, tears stinging her eyes. She wrapped him in a fluffy towel, dressed him in silk pajamas, and tucked him into his castle-shaped bed. "Stay," Leo whispered. It was the first word he had spoken to her. "I'll be right here," Alara said, pointing to the connecting door. "I'll leave it open." She sat in the armchair beside his bed until his breathing slowed and evened out. Once he was asleep, Era returned to her own room. She peeled off her ruined dress and stepped into the shower. The hot water felt like heaven. She scrubbed away the grime, the exhaustion, the remnants of her old life. When she stepped out, wrapping a towel tightly around herself, she walked into the bedroom and froze. A figure sat in the armchair in the corner of the darkened room. King Julian. He held a glass of whiskey, his tie loosened, the top button of his shirt undone. His eyes glowed gold in the dim light as he watched her. "We need to talk," he said, his voice rough. Era clutched the towel closer to her chest, her heart slamming against her ribs. "Your Majesty, I'm not dressed." "I noticed," he replied, taking a slow sip. He didn't look away. "My security team reviewed the footage from the ballroom and the hallway." He rose and walked toward her. The room seemed to shrink with every step. "You are an Omega," he said, stopping barely 2 feet away. "You have no wolf. You cannot shift." "Yes, Alpha," she whispered. "Then explain to me," he said, leaning in, his sense surrounding her, "why my son's wolf, dormant and sick since birth, calls out to you. Why I felt a mate bond ignite when I touched you." Era's eyes widened. "A mate bond? That's impossible. I was rejected. My bond is broken." "Is it?" Julian murmured. His fingers brushed her bare shoulder. This time, the spark wasn't subtle. It was fire. "Aragaspat." Julian's pupils dilated. "You are not broken, Era Vance." He spoke her name softly, dangerously. "You are hiding something," he said, "and I intend to discover what it is." Morning sunlight struck the Moonstone Palace, lighting the snow-covered peaks that surrounded the estate. Inside the royal suite, the air was tight with tension.
Aran slipped.
The memory of Julian's touch, the searing heat of his hand against her skin, had kept her awake long after he disappeared into the shadows without another word. Now she stood in the nursery, brushing Leo's hair. He sat quietly on a small stool, clutching a stuffed wolf she had found in the closet. "You look very handsome, Leo," she said gently, fastening the buttons of his navy blazer. "Papa's mad," Leo whispered, glancing toward the door. Alara paused. "Papa isn't mad at you, sweetheart," she said softly. "He just carries a lot of heavy things. Being a king is hard work." "He smells like thunder," Leo said. Alara marveled at his perception. Where others saw only a frightening man, Leo sensed the weight of his father's emotions. The door opened, but it wasn't Julian. Mrs. Holloway entered, her expression more sour than ever. "The king requests the presence of the prince," she said, sneering slightly. "And you, in the council chamber." Immediately, Era's stomach dropped. The council. She knew of them from history books, 12 of the oldest, most traditional alphas, ruthless purists who advised the king. "Is something wrong?" Era asked, taking Leo's hand as she stood. "The council does not approve of a rogue Omega raising the air," Holloway said with grim satisfaction. "They are here to evaluate your suitability. If you fail, you'll be expelled through the gates before lunch." Era tightened her grip on Leo's hand. "I won't leave him." "We'll see," Holloway muttered. They walked through endless corridors. As they neared the council chamber, the voices grew louder. "It is an insult to the crown," a booming voice barked. "A rejected Omega, likely cursed." The boy needs a strong mother figure, not a broken servant, another snapped. He's already unstable, Lord Thorn, someone argued. Perhaps a weak nanny is safer. He won't feel threatened. The heavy oak doors were shoved open by guards. The chamber was circular, dominated by a massive obsidian table. 12 men and women sat around it, power radiating from them like pressure in the air. At the head of the table sat Julian.
He looked exhausted.
Dark circles shadowed his eyes as his fingers tapped a steady rhythm against the stone. When Era entered, the room fell silent. Every gaze locked onto her. Every alpha in that room was weighing her, judging her, deciding whether she would break. The pressure of so many dominant auras packed into one chamber was suffocating. Era felt her knees wobble, the instinct to submit rising like a tidal pull. But then Leo squeezed her hand. Protect, she told herself. I have to protect him. She straightened her spine and stepped forward, eyes lowered but chin lifted. So this is the girl, Lord Thorn sneered. He was enormous, gray-bearded, with cruel eyes. She smells like dishwater and fear. Enough, Thorn, Julian warned, his voice low. She is here, because I summoned her. Alara, bring Leo to me. Era walked to the head of the table. Go to your father, Leo, she whispered. Leo hesitated, staring at the angry faces. He didn't want to go. Instead, he slid behind Era, hiding in the folds of her skirt. The council members gasped. Look at that. Thorn shouted, slamming his fist on the table. The prince hides behind a servant instead of standing with his king. She has bewitched him. She is making him soft. He is 4 years old, Era snapped. The room froze, and Omega had just raised her voice at a council member. Thorn rose slowly, his face turning purple. You dare speak to me, mongrel. He unleashed his alpha aura, a wave of psychic force meant to crush submission out of her. It hit Era like a physical blow. She gasped and dropped to one knee, unable to breathe. It felt as if gravity had multiplied tenfold. Stop it, Julian roared, standing. No, your majesty, Thorn said, keeping the pressure on Era. Let us see what she is made of. If she breaks this easily, she cannot be around the prince. Era was shaking. The stone floor was ice-cold under her knees, her vision blurring.
Submit.
Her instinct screamed. Roll over. Show your throat. And then she heard it, a low, vibrating growl. Leo stepped out from behind her. He wasn't hiding anymore. He planted himself between Era and Lord Thorn, his small chest puffed out, lips peeled back to show tiny canines. Leo, no. Alara wheezed. Get out of the way, boy, Thorn commanded. Leo didn't move. He looked up at the massive alpha and snarled, a sound that bounced off the stone walls. Then he spoke, clearly and loudly. Do not hurt her. The silence afterward was absolute. The council members stared at one another in shock. They had been told the prince was mute, feral, incapable of complex thought. Did he just speak? An elderly female council member asked, adjusting her glasses. Leo turned to his father. Papa, make him stop. Julian looked at his son, really looked at him for the first time in years without seeing a monster. He saw a protector. Julian's gaze snapped to Thorn. His eyes shifted fully into gold. The air crackled with electricity. Release her, Thorn, Julian said, his voice like grinding rock, or I will remove your head from your shoulders. Thorn cut the aura instantly and sat down heavily, suddenly pale. I was merely testing her, my king. Era dragged in a breath and coughed. Leo immediately turned to her, patting her cheeks with his small hands. I'm okay, baby, she whispered, hugging him. Julian walked around the table. He didn't look at the council. He looked at Era still on the floor, and at his son shielding her. The test is over, Julian announced. As you can see, Era has accomplished in 12 hours what your expensive tutors failed to do in 4 years. She has given my son his voice back. He offered his hand. Era stared at the king's hand, large, scarred, powerful, then placed her trembling fingers in his. He pulled her up effortlessly. For a heartbeat, he didn't let go. He drew her close enough that she could smell him, sandalwood and rain, cutting through the sweat and tension of the council chamber. "You did well," he murmured, for her ears alone. "I didn't do anything," she replied shakily. "You stood," he said, intensity burning in every word. Most grown men would have passed out under Thorne's pressure. "You just knelt." He turned back to the council. "Elara Vance is the royal nanny. This discussion is closed. Now get out." 2 weeks passed. Life at Moonstone Palace found a rhythm. Era spent her days with Leo. They explored the vast library, played hide-and-seek through endless hallways, and wandered the royal gardens for hours. Leo was thriving. The tantrums had almost completely stopped. He spoke more every day, still shy with everyone except Era and Julian. Julian, however, was a problem. He was busy running the kingdom, but he made time. He began joining them for dinner in the nursery, claiming he wanted to monitor Leo's progress, yet he spent half the meal watching Era. He asked about her life, her favorite books, her dreams. It was dangerous. Era could feel herself falling for him, and that was a cliff she couldn't afford to step off. She was temporary. He was the king. And the mystery of the mate's spark hung between them like a loaded gun. One sunny afternoon, Era and Leo were in the rose garden, a private section of the estate walled off by tall hedges, filled with prize-winning white roses that had been the late queen's favorite. "Look, Era, a bug," Leo shouted, crouching over a beetle. "That's a very shiny beetle," Era smiled, sitting on a stone bench. "Well, isn't this a charming domestic scene?" The voice was like silk wrapped around a dagger. Era looked up. A woman stood at the garden entrance, arguably the most beautiful creature Era had ever seen. Cascading blonde hair, ice blue eyes, a figure perfectly framed by the tight emerald dress she wore. Lady Seraphina, Era guessed, rising and bowing her head. She'd heard the servants whispering. Seraphina was the daughter of the Northern Alpha, and the council's top choice to become Julian's second wife. "You're the stray Julian picked up," Seraphina said, gliding closer. Her heels clicked sharply against the cobblestones as she looked Era up and down with unmistakable disgust. "I expected more. You look like a starved rat." Era didn't answer. She only shifted, just enough to place herself firmly between Seraphina and Leo. Seraphina's gaze slid to the boy, her lip curling. "So, this must be the little beast." Leo rose to his feet, sensing the hostility. He didn't growl, but his whole body went rigid. "Prince Leo," Era corrected softly. Seraphina laughed. "He doesn't look like a prince. He looks dirty. Look at his hands, digging in the dirt like a commoner." She reached into her purse. "Come here, little boy. I have something for you." "We don't accept gifts from strangers," Elara said quickly. Seraphina's eyes flashed. "I'm not a stranger. I'm your future queen. Know your place, servant." She produced a small, ornate silver box and snapped it open. A chocolate truffle, imported from Switzerland.
"Go on.
"Take it." Leo glanced at the box, then lifted his chin and sniffed the air. Era's wolf might have been dormant, but her senses weren't. Beneath the rich scent of chocolate and expensive perfume, something else cut through, bitter and acrid, like wolfsbane. "No." Elara lunged the instant Leo reached for it. She slapped Seraphina's hand aside. The silver box flew from Seraphina's grip and landed in the dirt. The truffle rolled out, then sizzled faintly as it touched the grass. "You insolent bitch!" Seraphina shrieked. "You touched me." "It's poisoned." Era recoiled, dragging Leo behind her. Her heart hammered as she forced the words out. "I can smell it. You're lying. You're insane." Seraphina's face twisted with rage. "I was trying to be kind, and you assault me?" Her hand lifted, and her nails lengthened into claws.
She wasn't going to slap Elara.
She was going to maim her. Era braced, shielding Leo with her body. But the blow never came. A black blur tore across the garden. Fast, violent, unstoppable. A massive wolf, midnight black with eyes like burning gold, slammed into Seraphina and drove her into the ground. It was the king. Julian had shifted. He pinned Serafina to the grass, jaws hovering inches from her throat, and released a roar so powerful it shook leaves from the trees. Guards poured in from every direction, weapons drawn. Julian shifted back. Human again, naked and completely unashamed, fury radiating off him like heat. He seized Serafina by the neck and yanked her upright. "Julian, she attacked me." Serafina choked, slipping into the role of victim in a heartbeat. "That crazy servant attacked me. I was only giving the boy a sweet." Julian didn't look at her. He looked at Era. "Era," Alara said, her voice shaking, breath uneven. "The chocolate, it smells wrong." Julian's head snapped toward his captain of the guard. "Test it." A guard carefully retrieved the truffle with gloved hands and sniffed once, then recoiled hard. "Wolfsbane, Your Majesty. Highly concentrated. Enough to kill a child in seconds." The color drained from Serafina's face. I didn't know. Someone must have planted it." "Julian, you know I would never." "Silence," Julian roared. The single word hit like a force. Serafina crumpled to her knees. "You brought poison into my home," Julian said, his voice suddenly deadly calm. "You tried to kill my son." I, Serafina stammered, desperate and shrinking. "Take her to the dungeons," Julian ordered. "And contact her father. Tell him if he wants his daughter back in one piece, he will explain why she tried to assassinate the heir." As Serafina was dragged away screaming, Julian turned back to Era. The rage in his eyes cracked, replaced by something raw and terrified. He checked her quickly, hands moving over her arms and face, searching for injuries. "You're shaking," he said. I thought she was going to kill him." Era sobbed, the adrenaline draining out of her all at once. Julian pulled her into his chest. He didn't care that he was naked, and in that moment, neither did she. Era pressed her face into his neck, breathing him in like oxygen. "You saved him," Julian whispered into her hair. Then he pulled back and cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Era, how did you smell the wolfsbane?" His voice dropped lower. That concentration was masked by sugar. Even a trained tracker would have missed it. Era blinked through streaming tears. I don't know. It just smelled wrong." Julian stared at her, realization dawning. His gaze flicked to the mark on her neck, the blank place where a mating mark should have been. "Alara," he said softly, like the name meant something he'd only just understood. "You aren't the rejected Omega." "What?" Era breathed, confused and unsteady. "Thomas didn't just reject you," Julian said, his thumb tracing her jaw. "He broke the bond." His eyes sharpened. "Yes, but your wolf didn't die. It went into hibernation to protect you." Era's breath caught. "It's waking up?" Julian leaned his forehead against hers. "Yes." "Why now?"
"Ara whisperat."
"Because it finally found an alpha strong enough to protect it." He didn't kiss her, not yet. He only closed the distance and breathed her in, as if he couldn't help himself. "But we have a problem," Julian murmured. Serafina wasn't acting alone. Wolfsbane of that quality only comes from one place. His eyes hardened. The royal apothecary. Someone inside the palace wanted his son dead. He looked toward Leo, who was poking the poison truffle with a stick, completely oblivious to how close he'd come to dying. "I need you to trust me," Julian said to Era. "I'm going to have to do something dangerous to flush out the traitor, and I need you to play your part." "What do I have to do?" Era asked, swallowing her fear and forcing herself steady. Julian's eyes glinted. "Tonight. At the grand ball, I'm going to claim you, not as a nanny."
"Ara froza."
"But as my queen?" She gasped, the words barely audible. "But the council, the pack, they'll revolt." "Let them," Julian growled. "I'm done playing by their rules." The grand ball at Moonstone Palace was the most watched event in the nation's history. Cameras from every major news network lined the corners of the gilded ballroom, broadcasting live to millions. The air was thick with expensive perfume and nervous sweat. The 12 council members gathered near the dais, wearing smug expressions, confident they already knew what was coming. They believed the king was about to announce his engagement to Lord Thor's niece, and seal the future exactly the way they wanted. The doors were meant to open on a spectacle, something polished, strategic, and perfect enough to secure King Julian's political future. But the moment the heavy oak panels swung wide, the entire hall inhaled at once. Julian didn't enter with a highborn alpha at his side. He walked in with Era. She was no longer the invisible servant wrapped in a stained gray rag. She was unforgettable. Era wore a floor-length gown that shimmered like liquid gold, hugging her figure as if it had been made for her alone. Her hair was swept up, exposing the graceful line of her neck. And she didn't lower her eyes. She didn't shrink. She stared straight ahead, calm, unflinching, her hand locked firmly in Julian's. Lord Thorne stepped forward, his face flushing into a furious red. "This is an outrage," he snapped. "You bring a servant to the throne. A rejected Omega." Julian climbed the steps without slowing, drawing Era up beside him at the dais. "She is not a servant," he declared, his voice booming through the microphones. "She is the only person in this room worthy of the crown." Thorne's laugh came sharp and cruel, like a bark. "She's a defect. She can't even shift." "Tonight is about truth." Julian cut in, cold as steel. He lifted a hand and signaled the guards. The side doors opened, and Serafina was dragged inside, sobbing, her wrists cuffed as she stumbled under the grip of two soldiers. A wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd. Serafina's eyes found her uncle, wide with terror. "Tell them," Julian commanded. The silence was brutal. Serafina choked on a sob. "It was Lord Thorne," she cried. "He gave me the wolfsbane. He told me to poison the prince. He said if the heir was dead, the king would be weak." The room exploded into chaos. "Treason," voices shouted. "Lies." Thorne roared, his expression twisting as he realized his plan was collapsing. On live television. "I did what was necessary. The boy is a broken monster, and you are weak." Julian didn't wait for the guards to move. Thorne whistled sharply. In an instant, nearly 20 guardsmen, men Thorne had bought, snapped their rifles toward the throne. "Kill them all." Thorne screamed, his body contorting as bones cracked and shifted. Fur ripped through skin as he transformed into a massive gray wolf, scarred and brutal, built like war itself. The ballroom erupted. Guests shrieked and dove beneath tables. Chairs toppled. Glass shattered. Julian shifted instantly. Midnight black, powerful, unstoppable, meeting Thorne in a savage clash of teeth and claws right at the dais. Era was thrown backward by the force. She staggered, then spun toward the secure room hidden behind the throne where Leo was supposed to be safe. She didn't make it in time. A traitor guard kicked the door open and lunged inside. He grabbed Leo by the front of his tiny blazer and yanked the screaming child into the open. The guard raised his claws, ready to erase the royal bloodline. "No!" Era screamed. She was 20 feet away. Julian was pinned beneath 3 wolves. There was no one else. No one was coming. Era's vision turned red. 3 years of fear, fear that had caged her wolf, cracked under the pressure of a mother's rage. The trauma of rejection shattered like glass, and something ancient and furious surged through her veins, burning hotter than anything she had ever known. "Not my son." A howl tore through the ballroom, nothing like any wolf's call they'd ever heard. It wasn't just sound. It vibrated in bone and blood, so powerful it sent shockwaves through the air and splintered the crystal chandeliers overhead. Time seemed to stop. White light exploded where Era stood, blinding, violent, holy. And when it faded, the girl was gone. In her place stood a wolf of legend. She was massive, taller than the alpha males, her fur as white as untouched snow, her eyes glowing with electric blue power that made even hardened warriors flinch. A white wolf, the rarest of all, the direct blessing of the moon goddess herself. The traitor holding Leo froze, terror draining every ounce of confidence from his body. "Impossible," he whispered. The white wolf moved faster than sight. A blur of white fury slammed into him. Her jaws crushed his armor like tin, and she hurled him across the room as if he weighed nothing. Then she planted herself over the trembling prince, shoulders squared, teeth bared, one single snarl promising death to anyone who dared take another step. The fighting stopped. Thorn, bleeding from Julian's bite, lifted his head, and when he saw her, his ears flattened against a skull. Every wolf knew the stories. To fight a white wolf was to fight the moon herself. Julian, seeing his mate in her true form, threw his head back and howled in triumph. The traitors faltered. Then their weapons clattered to the floor. Thorn whimpered and dropped low, belly to the ground in complete submission. The cameras zoomed in. The whole world watched as the rejected defect stood over her enemies, no longer a servant, no longer invisible, now a queen in her true form. Era Vance hadn't just survived. She had ascended, and as Leo buried his face into her thick white fur, safe at last, the truth settled over the room like a final verdict. The reign of the White Queen had begun. This is the incredible story of Era Vance, how she rose from a rejected, bullied outcast to become the most powerful queen the werewolf world had ever seen. It's proof that your current situation does not define your future. People judged Era by her rank and her past. But when it mattered most, she proved that real power comes from love, courage, and the instinct to protect the innocent. She didn't need a title to be a hero, she only needed a chance. So, what would you have done if you were in Era's shoes? Would you have forgiven the pack that mistreated you, or would you have walked away? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of justice, romance, and the rise of the white wolf, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a little inspiration, and subscribe with the bell on so you never miss our next dramatic story. Thanks for watching.